Taking sides in a war makes you an ally, and as an ally, you can either fight for or against the warring parties. Taking sides has pitched several global countries as enemies or friends to Russia and Ukraine. Many countries have taken sides in the Russia-Ukraine war. The United States and NATO members, including other European Union members, have taken sides in supporting Ukraine. Russia, Iran, China, North Korea, and other smaller countries have also taken sides against Ukraine and NATO and the European Union. Africa has not been left out in this race. In fact, several African countries have publicly declared their support for either Russia or Ukraine. Some have strongly criticized Russia for invading a sovereign nation, Ukraine. Some have also criticized the United States for forcing Ukraine to join NATO. Some have also criticized Ukraine for, for dishonoring their agreements with Russia. While these developments are proceeding, countries like South Africa publicly declared their support for they publicly discredited the warrant of arrest by the ICC to Russian president, and one of their controversial politicians, Julius Malema, stated clearly that he supports Vladimir Putin, that is the Russian president, in his quest in Ukraine. I have also stated in just a recent video that taking sides in the Russia-Ukraine war has landed Sudan into problems. Sudan is known as an ally of Russia, and one of the warring parties, that is the Rapid Support Forces, is actively supported by Russia. Russia is supporting the Rapid Support Forces militarily and financially. And in one of the articles shared by the CNN, Ukraine launched drone strikes on the Rapid Support Forces in Sudan. That means that Ukraine attacked the Rapid Support Forces in Sudan, in Africa, not in Russia, not in Ukraine, but in Africa. Ukraine is now attacking a Russian ally in Africa. The same thing can happen to Russia. Russia can decide to attack a Ukraine ally in Africa. And one of the open allies to Ukraine in Africa and in East Africa is Kenya. Kenya is openly supporting Ukraine against Russia. In fact, one of the dailies in Kenya, that is the Star, reported that on 19th, that was yesterday, 19th September 2023, at 21:06 hours, Mani Anyango, that is the correspondent to the Star, wrote an article titled "Ruto Meets Ukraine President Zelensky." And in a nutshell, the Kenyan president said, and I quote, "Kenya advocates for a peaceful resolution of the Russia-Ukraine conflict to restore stability, alleviate the suffering of the people, and stop the destruction of poverty." He also stated that I stressed the importance of Ukraine's continued food exports to the region. That is Zelensky saying. And Ruto said in retaliation, "We know it has been difficult for the people of Ukraine. Stay strong and you have our support." That is the Kenyan president telling the Ukrainian president, Zelensky, that We know it has been difficult for the people of Ukraine. Stay strong, and you have our support. We believe in world order. That is what I wanted. Kenya is publicly declaring that it supports Ukraine against Russia. This simply means that Kenya has taken sides in the Russia-Ukraine war. And taking sides in the Russian-Ukraine war has placed Kenya as an ally of Ukraine. Placing Kenya as an ally of Ukraine means that Kenya is now an enemy of Russia. I have just given you an example of what is happening in Sudan now as we speak. Russia is an ally of the Rapid Support Forces, which is one of the warring parties in Sudan. And Russia, I said, and the Rapid Support Forces, being an ally of Russia, is deemed an enemy of Ukraine. The same thing applies to Kenya. Kenya, being an ally of Ukraine, is deemed an enemy of Russia. This means that Kenya can be a target of Russian military intervention. Russia can decide to launch military attacks in Kenya. Russia can decide to dismantle the Kenyan government. Russia can decide to destabilize the Kenyan government simply because of their public support for Ukraine, for the president's public declaration of his support of the war in favor of Ukraine. I believe Mr. President was acting on a personal capacity, because I think he never consulted any Kenyan on whether to support Russia or Ukraine. He consulted no one. This is acting out of personal responsibility. He said a personal opinion about the Kenyan stand on the Russia-Ukraine war, and this personal stand can land the country into problems. Kenya now appears as a proxy in this war. As a proxy, Kenya can provide a possible site, warring site, for the Russia-Ukraine war, like it is happening in Sudan. Russia and Ukraine can decide to launch their military engagements in Kenya, because if Russia decides to attack Kenya, then Ukraine as an ally of Kenya will attack Russia in Kenya. I think this was unwise for the Kenyan president to publicly announce that he supports, I don't want to say that Kenyan support, to publicly announce that he supports the war, Ukraine's war against Russia. This can lead and can convince Russia to attack Kenya. The same thing which is happening in Sudan. Ukraine is attacking the Rapid Support Forces in Sudan. Why? Because the Rapid Support Forces in Sudan are an ally of Russia. Is it time for Russia to attack Kenya? And if this happens, will Kenya defend itself against Russia, which is a global superpower? I think the leadership must be wise in their statements. They must consult widely in their statements. Making erroneous statements like this in a case, a situation that affects the whole world, is reckless. The Kenyan president must understand that public declaration of support to Ukraine is declaring war with Russia, is simply saying, communicating that I don't support Russia. Russia is my enemy. I support the South African president, Mr. Ramaphosa, because all over the years, despite being pushed to the end to publicly declare that he supports Ukraine or Russia, he has never declared that he supports Russia or Ukraine. He has always maintained that these two countries are sovereign. These two countries are independent. And when he was asked about arresting the Russian president when he attends the BRICS summit in South Africa, he said that as a sovereign nation, he cannot order the arrest of a sovereign president. This applies to Kenya. Kenya must not declare publicly that it supports Ukraine in their war against Russia. This can convince Russia that Kenya is a strong enemy in East Africa. Kenya is an enemy in its war against Ukraine, and this conviction can lead Russia to launch drone attacks in Kenya or destabilize the government. I see this as a possibility, and I know many of engagers on this platform share their opinion. The reckless statement, the reckless move by the Kenyan president to declare publicly to support Ukraine against the war in Russia can convince Russia to invade Kenya. The same thing which is happening in Sudan. Ukraine attacked the Rapid Support Forces, which is an ally of Russia. I think if it is possible, African countries and African governments must refrain from publicly declaring their support or dissatisfaction with the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, and they must desist from taking sides in this war if they want to be safe.